This
Steve,
conference will now be recorded.
and thank you to Stefanos and Panos and Patricia and Andrea for giving me the opportunity to talk today. So, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hojat Nataraja, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tunyat. Tunyat is a Myanmar word or a Burmese word, and the meaning of the word is to do the tilling, like to till the ground. So the mission of the company is to save and to harvest more and to create prosperity for all so that smallholder farmers in the country can also earn and increase their incomes. So just a bit of a story to kind of set the scene, but historically, like 3,000 years ago, the king of Burma would every year sort of do this special ceremony to for the beginning of the season where he would start to till the ground, and the courtiers and the peasants and stuff would follow him around. So this has kind of been going on for a long time in their history. And when we would travel around this country, like Myanmar is located in Southeast Asia, like near Thailand, we would see that, now even 3,000 years later, manual labor is still being used. And so people really aren't being paid to be very efficient. And the reality is that there's also not enough supply in terms of new or modern machinery as well. Um, so in terms of when we also would go to visit the farming areas, we could see that a lot of the areas are still prone to flooding. And one of the reasons why there's sort of annual flooding is because there isn't much land preparation or leveling of the land going on. And so this means that basically without as much drainage happening, the fields are more prone to flooding. So here you can see like a picture of some of our young people, our tractor drivers, and then you can sort of see the difficulties of kind of getting in and out of some of the fields without lack of roads and infrastructure as well. So fast forward to sort of today, and one of the developments in the country has been, the country has been under military rule for the last 50 years, and then they've just sort of reopened up recently. And so now, there's a huge population here that are young people, youth and children. And from this population, let's say 53 million people, more than 25 million people here are using smartphones. And of this, there's a large Facebook penetration. So the young people in general are kind of driving this change, but people in a way here almost consider Facebook like the internet. That's what they search when they search in the Google. They search through Facebook first. So out of this kind of, what we found when we were doing our validation to set up our enterprise was that the farmers would talk to us about things like rising migration. A lot of their young people would travel to Thailand or Singapore to go and work as domestics and laborers. And so there was a labor shortage in the farming areas. And also things like crop monitoring, plant health monitoring, data analytics was not that prevalent yet. So a lot of our training with young people is focusing on them literally, like in this case, onboarding farmer families on how to use applications and how to use data to benefit their farms. The country itself, in terms of like the positioning, is unique in the sense that it is positioned between the two of the largest markets in the world, like India and Africa. So this combined population with Myanmar sort of as a transit or a trading area in between is sort of what we're seeing. One other development which is interesting is that the soil here is considered quite pure. So there's much less inorganic fertilizer content in the soil. So this is better actually for kind of agricultural development as well. So out of this, like our kind of enterprise started our journey. This is like 4 years ago, where we joined a tech challenge and then we won the ag tech category. So that's sort of a photo with me with my Burmese co-founders. And the sponsor of this was a large American INGO here called Proximity Designs. And so they had been working with smallholder farmers here for 15 years. So we reached out and we did a pilot project with them on mechanization. And then that's how the company grew. And then we developed kind of a service offering for the farmers. Now, after like, 3, 4 years, we now have more than 46 people engaged. So, these kind of problem sets continue, and like what we see like more and more is that um, there's a sort of a pricing squeeze between farmers who here earn about $120 a month. Like that's like their average monthly salary. And then, on the other hand, machinery is very expensive. And then things like climate change are happening now more often. So here you can see the picture of one of our corn farmers. And so for almost 2 years in a row, he lost his corn crop because of climate change flooding. And so now, on the other hand, having machinery to do the harvest or tilling on time, it actually can help him save his crop. So he sort of saves thousands of dollars through that. So out of this kind of the organization formed, and so kind of what are we? We focus first on grower groups by providing a mechanization service for them. And then after that, we start to consolidate these farmer groups to offer things like farming as a service, like different inputs like seed and fertilizer, and linking them to buyers so they can buy back their crop for a better price. So in a way, the farmers got to get more honest value for their crops as well. How do we do this? Like a number of ways, but we've been learning about ecosystem development at the village level. So what this involves is like, let's say training groups of women or guys on things that are more vocational. So like, let's say catering or food safety, and also tractor driver or mechanic training. And so these things are even also bookkeeping and finance. So these things then feed back into our actual operation in the village level. They also help provide jobs for young people so that they don't have to leave and do migration. They can actually reskill and do something in their own area. Another element of this is aggregation and technology. So on our tractors, we put in IoT sensors, so they follow the machines around to record the acres. And we also use things like chatbots via Facebook to educate farmers on budgets and planning. And then, after 1 or 2 years of kind of building trust using the machinery service, and other things start to come in. So then the farmers come to us and say, like I need help with seeds, or do you have a buyer, or what about a better quality fertilizer? So we start to introduce them to other people in our network, and then this also helps them to get more premium type of crops and growth instead of using like the normal seed. We do a lot of partnerships in the business, so we work with most of the tractor multinationals, so people like John Deere, or Kubota, or New Holland, Massey Ferguson. And so during the monsoon season, they train our young people to learn how to fix tractors in the remote fields, and also provide, servicing for them as well. A lot of these like youth are actually high school dropouts. So in here, the big thing is the grade 10 exam. And if they fail the exam, then they can't go to the university. So we kind of offer like an alternative pathway so they can learn to be a mechanic or a driver, and then like develop these sort of technical skills. So local employment is like a big factor for us. In terms of, the actual landscape itself, the market here is still fairly untapped. Like agricultural land use here is only maybe 20%. And the way we run our business model is we just charge a market price for the farmers to rent the tractor or the harvester, which is roughly $50 per acre. Farms here are a lot more smaller compared to like Europe, or I'm from Australia. Farms are quite large there. So the average holding is around 5 acres per farmer. In terms of impacts, I think these are sort of the circular areas of the economy that relate maybe to you guys. And what we see are a few things happening. One is by, using more precision agriculture, we lower our carbon footprint. The other one is indirect and direct jobs. So by working in clusters of farms in areas, like for example, one cluster might have 100,000 farmers in the area and maybe 100 villages. So we start to work with 10 villages and then 20 and then 30 every year. And so this creates a lot of kind of indirect jobs. And also on the other side, farmers gain more income. The income gain is mostly by using precision agriculture, so they get a better threshing result with the yield, with the combine harvest. And also by doing farming as a service, they can basically use more premium seed, so they get a better price for selling more like a premium rice or a premium corn product. Currently, like our fleet, we offer kind of, this is like two things, like a direct service where our own machines go around with the youth driving them to offer this to the farmers, like corn or rice farmers, or also like sesame farmers. And then the other part of the business is a bit more like Uber or Grab, where it's a matchmaking, where we match local owners and then we match them to farms, and then we might provide the driver or help them with cash collection. So this is kind of like the circular economy modality where you're kind of using also existing machines to increase their utilization. Like other times they would just be sitting in their, farm or not getting many orders, so then they also can get more regular orders and income for the whole year round. In terms of traction, we're sort of, I guess, growing. So we're now up to the year 3 point, for any agri-tech startup. So we're kind of now about to hit our break-even point. And we've done a number of, acres of tilling, and there's also several thousand farmers in the system. So kind of like to scale up, what we're trying to do more is partner with trade finance companies who are interested to support farmer groups who grow these kind of commodities like rice, sesame, and maize. One interesting development here is that now I think in Europe and in America and Asia, there's a big push for plant protein. And so people are eating, like soy-based meat and this kind of stuff. And one of the raw ingredients for a lot of plant protein is actually lentil and chickpea and things like cassava. So those ingredients are actually grown here quite a lot. And so there's some type of opportunity there to kind of link the raw ingredient from these growers into farm or food companies as well. So we work with partners from across the spectrum. On the one side, we receive some grant funding from people like USAID, from the Ponzi facilities, people like the Norwegian government or Canadian government. And then on the other side, we also work with impact investment funds like Uberis and the Yield Lab, and Campani. And then we also partner with different tractor multinationals as well. So kind of they also support us to kind of support the farmers. In terms of growth, that's kind of like our next sort of 5-year outlook. But yeah, like basically, like it's going up, and we expect it to kind of keep growing as we work with more and more groups of farmers. I think just some takeaway challenges to kind of wrap up is that what we see in terms of insights is that in the cases where we do village-led or capacity building programs with women and youth, that these tend to produce kind of stronger bonds of unity. And this is really important in terms of a foundation for collective farming and collective selling and procurement. The other thing is also is that Myanmar received a lot of aid funding after the cyclone Nargis and natural disasters came in. But now some of this funding is starting to dry up, especially with COVID-19. So the question is like, how do these farming groups that were set up by NGOs now become more sustainable? So how did the private sector come in or partnerships develop so that like the income can continue for the farmers? And of course, the big like challenge that I think the whole world is facing, including here, is climate change. And so these things like unpredictable rainfall and focusing on things like conservation agriculture, these also need to come in here as well. Otherwise, like these things like flooding and stuff will just continue to get worse. So that's just a sort of a picture of some of our staff and young people that we work with. And yeah, that kind of wraps it up. So I have a video, but I'm not sure if it will work. So I can try it. Maybe we can see if it works. Yeah.
Sorry, were you able to enable the settings to share how we spoke, how we wrote about?
Yeah. I sort of tried, but can you guys see the video? Is it working?
We can see the video. Let's see if we can hear the audio, because to ensure that we can hear the audio, you needed to enable.
Is the sound working?
No sound, just visuals.
No sound. Okay. Let me just sort of try.
I think
it's fine.
Could you hear it while the video was going? Could you hear it?
I can hear it. Yeah.
So do you
fine.
see?
We can watch it. It's
okay. Yeah. This is just sort of the area where we are working, so it gives you a bit of a landscape in terms of the lifestyle of the people there. So yeah, the people are sort of subsistence based, and do other things in the village as well to earn a livelihood. We see even a lot of cows being used for plowing and tilling. So this sort of traditional farming is still occurring. These are some of the rice paddy areas. So this is the service that we offer, the combine harvesters. Yeah, these things you can see like bagging and transport is still manual. Yeah, so he's sort of just talking about himself as a user of the service, this farmer, and then the impact of it. So yeah, thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this fascinating presentation. I can see already in the chat that there are quite a number of questions. We'll try to go through them. So Steve Kennedy would like to ask this very good, very interesting question.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, Hujat, always wonderful to hear from your company. You know, really fantastic organization. And I just think the things that you're doing is really, well, just awesome, really. My question is about the farming as a service as a really exciting business model, which has got great potential to it. So I'm wondering about the opportunities here with the revenue model and the revenue model you currently use versus ones which you could be using in the future. So at the moment, if I understand correctly, the farmers are directly purchasing, say, the seeds or the fertilizers from you, and that's the revenue model as the farming as a service, versus, say, the opportunity for farmers maybe to pay you in a percentage of their crop yield, which offers the opportunity there that if there is a problem with the climate change related extreme weather events, that there's kind of a no fee if no yield. What kind of so my question here is kind of like, really, can you unpack the revenue models which you're looking at the moment and exploring, and are you looking into these kind of ones?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Steve. And yeah, likewise, always good to hear from you. I think, yeah, like, I mean, farming as a service, like the way we kind of tested the model is we did this test with it like for the last monsoon paddy season, where the buyer approached us and he said, okay, we have a buyer based in Thailand that wants to grow wild rice in Myanmar. It's kind of like a black colored rice. And so they sort of said, can you test for 40 acres? So that's sort of what we agreed to do. And in terms of the business model, the way it worked was that they would supply the seed and fertilizer. In this case, they wanted it to be organic. So instead of fertilizer, it was actually nanotechnology to kind of address pesticide, pest and disease from the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And the farmers basically received the whole thing on credit. So they didn't have to pay. There was an interest fee for the seed and the fertilizer. And then at harvest, when we harvest the paddy, then basically the local buyer buys back the crop and we deliver it to their warehouse, and then they do the processing and milling, and then they send it to Thailand to the import buyer. So in terms of margin, like from our side, we earn margin from the sale of the seed as well as the fertilizer, and then also the crop buyback. And then the farmers were happy because they were growing the broken rice, kind of like a rice variety here called Amata. And with the rice berry, basically, the buyer was buying for 8 lakh per acre, which is roughly the same as like $550 per acre. And with the normal broken rice quality, they were buying for around $200. So they got a significant premium because they were growing like a premium rice. So in terms of your point about weather
the risk of the no yield is still on the farmer there.
I mean, it's definitely there. Like, I mean, what we did with the contracting is we put a floor, so the buyer agreed that if there's a lower yield or some issue happens that they can't get the yield that they need, like the number of baskets of paddy, they would still buy at a minimum. So great. That was one thing to kind of guard against price fluctuation. The other thing, like relating to weather itself, like we did a lot of plant monitoring of the crop. So we would send these teams of youth to monitor the health of the crop, to check against pest and disease. So then the buyer kind of would advise, or their agronomy team would advise on how to manage that better in order to reduce more wastage at the end, or to avoid some of the insects eating the plants and things like that. So that sort of stuff lowered some of the risk. Unfortunately, things like weather, index insurance, and crop insurance. It hasn't really come into the country yet. It's being tested right now, but there aren't actually like any formal programs for it yet. Yeah.
No, it sounds like there's ways in which you can get it into the business model here,
Yeah.
to spread the risk,
Yeah.
say, more across the value chain.
Yeah.
Super. Thanks very
Right,
much.
exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Josep. And I think we have another question from Jayani. Jayani, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you very much. Presentation was quite interesting. The question I have is related to the youth engagement in your business. So with your presentation, we could see like there's quite a lot of public engagement, and also like you mentioned, there's quite rapid kind of digital growth, the usage of mobile phones, internet, and so on and so forth in Southeast Asia and also in South Asia. But most of the youth is reluctant to go for field jobs, especially relating to agriculture. And also they want like the office jobs, like very good 8 to 5 jobs, wearing ties and the shirts and the whole pack. But how did you overcome this challenge in your business? Was it a challenge at all? Or how did you overcome this? Did you go for some kind of collaborations in the local levels, from the village levels? What was your experience? I would like to know.
Yeah, so thank you for your question, and yeah, I fully agree. It is challenging. I think over time we've learned maybe two patterns here. One is that like in our Yangon, in our like city office, we also have some young people working as analysts or financial analysts or junior accountants and operations and logistics, kind of doing the data stuff and the ICT. So these people are like what you said, they are in a 9 to 5 mindset. They're quite happy with the office job and like getting a stable salary and whatnot. So we found with these people, when we would bring them to the field trips to meet with the farmer groups, so when we would actually get them out of the city and out of their comfort zone. And so they would start to be more challenged, right? And then they would have to do things like workshops with the farmers or talk to them about applications or GAP and actually train and also train the local staff in the branch. That actually they themselves found that quite fulfilling because it gave them a bit of a sense of purpose and meaning because they were doing stuff that was actually, they could see the direct impact helping, poor and smallholder farmers, and it was getting outside of the city comfort zone. So that was kind of one pattern we found. And then on the other side, like working with village youth in the villages and also in those areas, actually we found a lot of rural universities in those places, and these people would churn out thousands of fresh graduates every year who couldn't find jobs, and so they themselves would have to move to the big city because they couldn't find work. So we would team up with the local universities and say, okay, we're doing a data collection project here, or we're doing some analysis on the crop health. Can you send some of your students to come and work with us or do an internship or engage in a research project? And then they would, and then through that, they would kind of get excited, and then they'd be doing like applied science and applied learning or action research. And then this would stimulate them to do more. So this is one thing. And then for the more like let's say the high school dropout level, this one I think is more again back to providing a livelihood and stable income. Like a lot of this work is casual based. So in agriculture, just like tourism, when there's no season, there's no income. And so here there's no safety net. You can't go and get a dole or unemployment check if you don't have a job. And so for those drivers and extension teams, like having regular work for the whole year, like actually gave them better stability. And then they were kind of sort of saying that they would also learn new skills like how to use computers or how to write email, how to like do more advanced precision agriculture stuff, data analytics. So they would learn stuff that their other peers were not learning. And so this actually helped them as a springboard get into corporate jobs or to work for bigger companies. And some of them, even in the case of the drivers, would come back and say to us, like, hey, after 1 or 2 years, like, Thank you. I've learned a lot from you guys. Now I want to go and start my own tractor business, and like I've learned how to do this and that. So we were kind of like at first like, oh, we've trained these people for what? But then it's also good to know that actually they themselves feel confident enough to then go back and do the same thing. Because, as you can see, like there's more than enough land to go around. So these are just some things we found. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was so interesting. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Akis wanted to ask a question.
Yes, thank you, Andrea, who just for your wonderful presentation. I would like to ask you if you are worried in any sense that this access to mechanization may be linked to an intensified level of agriculture that would be something that would, let's say, have a negative effect on the good quality of soil that you mentioned also.
Yeah, like it is a concern. So like we've done some, initial like the Food and Agriculture Organization from the UN FAO has highlighted this point about the need to look at conservation agriculture and also regenerative agriculture. In fact, some of our tractor dealerships like Claas is a big German brand, the one that we use the corn machines for. They've even talked about starting here earthworm farms, so that the farmers can use earthworm to put more nutrient back into the soil. So we fully agree, and we want to sort of try to find more ways to do that by either running training programs about that or even selecting implements that do, like they call it now, zero tillage, so that they don't like get rid of the topsoil or like they don't or they deal with that hardened soil issue at the bottom, like underneath the soil. So yeah, we feel, I guess it's a complex problem, but also at the same time, by, let's say, doing more of this kind of education practice alongside the service delivery, like the two go hand in hand. But certainly the populations that apply that long term, they benefit. I think the challenge is that in these kind of countries, like you have huge fertilizer and chemical companies already here. And so like they like are massive in their marketing and pushing up these kind of product. And so oftentimes like the farmer themselves may or may not understand. Like I've seen photos, like I mean, I've been in workshops where the farmer will just pick like fertilizer based on the color of the picture because they can't actually read the content of the application of soil and potassium and nitrate that's going in. So this thing, yeah, like unfortunately it's there, and like it's kind of, the more I feel like getting back to the youth, that if we can kind of like educate them more or work with them, they in turn can then show that older generation who sometimes are the decision maker, like not to kind of go that way, but to go this way instead.
Thank you. Thank you, really. Thank you very
And
much.
final question again from Steve, who is asking whether you think it's viable to bring in machines owned by others in your machine pool. So, if you could expand a little bit this proposition that you have about better assets utilization by involving in the equation also assets owned by others. Do you think that would be viable? Is it something you're considering, or would this bring you too many additional supply demand problems?
Yeah, certainly. Like that's, I guess we call it the matchmaking or the Grab or Uber, for tractor, that side of the business model. But yeah, certainly yes, we are trying to do more of that, and I guess slowly scale it up. So in this same area where this farmer is located, initially for the first year, the first season of harvest, we had maybe 3 or 4 machines there, and none of these were our own. These were just local machines that we matchmake to come in to do the area. And then the second year, the second harvest, we went up to 12 machines. And then last year we went up to 30 machines. So these are all these kind of local machines that, yeah, they want more asset utilization. They're not owned by us, but they get additional income by going into that area. So we would kind of like to replicate that more across different clusters of farmers and groups around the country, because it helps the owners to get more utilization of the asset, but also locally it's better because like then the machines don't have to go up and down so much. So you save on fuel and transportation cost. And also, I think the benefit of having more is that like basically because these people all need the harvesting at the same time. So the more machines that are there to do it at the same time, then they get less wastage. If not, they have to wait for the machine to finish the other guy's farm, and then he'll come to their farm and then the next farm. So then the more he waits, the more wastage of the crop he will get. So yeah, this kind of, let's say, surge or like pooled resourcing is better. We can see some of the collective farms are starting to think like that, and I think it's kind of a way to go in terms of collective farming, collective procurement, collective, you know, asset purchase, and also even collective utilization.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much again for all these comprehensive examples and the very, very impactful work that you're doing. We really appreciate your time and dedication for this presentation, for all the work that you're doing. And we are grateful that you were able to share all these things with us here. And thank you very much again.
Great, thank you.
We will definitely stay in touch and follow all your great work. And hopefully, if there are any further follow-up questions, we will get back to you. So thank you very much again. And now we will move to another great case study of startup with a very strong community impact. And I would like to invite now Mr. Gareth Roberts from Regather from Sheffield, United Kingdom, in order to share their story with us. Gareth, I see that you're online. Let's try to share the screen. Let's see if it works, Gareth. Okay.
How are we doing? Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Okay.
Is the presentation displaying correctly?
Just 1 second. Now it's full screen, so thank you very much. The floor is yours, Gareth.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. Good morning. So yeah, hi, I'm Gareth, and I set up Regather about 10, 12 years ago, and I'm going to share some experience and thoughts with you this morning about system change, not climate change, how circular economy and systems thinking is helping transform food for Sheffield. A little bit about myself. I'm a social entrepreneur. Always have been. I've rarely held down a conventional 9-to-5 job, which I'm very proud of. I've got lots of relevant experience and passions. I've just listed a few of the key things there. I wanted just to give you a flavour of who I am as a person, not just you know, somebody on the end of a Zoom call or you know, just a face on a screen somewhere. My email address is there. If anybody would like to send me an email, that would be great. If any aspect of what we're doing is of interest and you want to ask questions. So there's sort of two organisations that I'm going to draw on today. Regather, so it's a cooperative community benefit society based in Sheffield, and it's evolved over a period of time. I'm not going to spend a long time explaining the history, because over 10, 12 years, that would take far too long. I'm trying to kind of plug you in to the, I think maybe just before COVID. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining the impact of COVID on our activities. That would also take far too long, and it's also very much still happening. So I think this is Regather as I think I'd like it to continue to be, and this is what it's developed into. Chef Food as well. It's a Sustainable Food Places member and cross-sector food partnership for Sheffield. So I'm going to spend a bit of time just explaining those in a bit more detail now. So Regather Works is our main premises. It's a community food hub in Sheffield. It has a range of facilities that are available for use. But primarily it's the best way of understanding it is a food hub. Behind the building, we have responsibility for an urban green space called the Club Garden, and working for over 10 years to create an edible landscape there, which isn't about food supply. It's a very limited amount of food that's produced. It's more about growing people and relationships and the interaction with nature and local food supply and seasonality. So it works ever so well alongside our main premises. And then we also have a farm in development, so a total of about 15 acres out in the Moss Valley, northeast Derbyshire, which is about 2.5-3 miles from the Regather Works building. Put some pictures to that. There's the Regather Works, and it's an old building. There's a wonderful history to the area that we're in. It's an industrial building. It doesn't look like a big factory or anything like that, but it was actually built as part of the metal and tool trades for which Sheffield is world famous. That's it now as Regather Works. That's behind our building. This is an architect's drawing of a project that's very much underway. It's not quite finished. It pretty much looks like that. So that's an aquaponic and hydroponic growing demonstrator. So exploring more sort of technically assisted food production techniques. And this is just a visual graphic of the Regather farm. So this is 15 acres, organic market garden. And we're, in terms of developing the site, we're about a third of the way down the site. So we've completed the market garden beds, which is that first narrower section at the top. The polytunnels, we've done most of the foundations on those this autumn. And then as we move forward over the next 6 to 12 months, we'll be populating the agroforestry area. So that's alley cropping with trees, and eventually we'll also be keeping chickens for fertility building and egg production. So moving on to Chef Food. So it's a food partnership. It's part of the Sustainable Food Places, used to be called Sustainable Food Cities movement. And it's all about bringing stakeholders together to allow greater coordination and cooperation around developing and transforming a more sustainable food system. The Sustainable Food Places movement is a national movement across the UK with about 70 or so cities. They operate an awards framework, bronze, silver and gold, that allow places to benchmark and improve their food system sustainability at a whole system level. So in Sheffield, the lead partners, the link with Regather, so we host the Chef Food partnership with the accountable body. We like Chef Food to kind of remain a quite light touch partnership organisation, that allows a much greater level of collaboration and governance being as appropriate, rather than creating a really kind of heavy, high workload, high maintenance corporate structure. And we have a range of lead partners who many of these organisations are kind of established food system actors in Sheffield in different parts of the food system, as well as anchor institutions like the University of Sheffield and Sheffield Hallam University. We've also seen a really exciting sort of development at a regional level as well. So as well as the Food Partnership in Sheffield, there are similar organisations in Doncaster, Barnsley and Rotherham. So that's the South Yorkshire or the Sheffield City region. And then scaling up again to a Yorkshire-wide level, which is a really substantial geography and covers a really substantial amount of the food producing landscape in the UK ultimately. But that's part of a much wider network. We're very much focused on the Sheffield area. So the kind of things we're doing, obviously we're all about developing the food partnership, influencing the Sheffield context, and promoting various food campaigns across Sheffield, all of which are about driving sustainable transformation of the food system at a local and regional level. So I've just put together a few slides which I think illustrate certain aspects of what we're doing, both through Regather and Chef Food, which I'm just going to talk through. So I see this as a kind of a narrative that the reason why I'm sharing it is to hopefully help you understand not just our approach, but also the kind of way in which we communicate that approach as being really important to engaging others in the process of transformation. So this is very much about change in action, as opposed to a particular kind of fixed outcome that we're working towards or that we've achieved at the moment. So it's very dynamic and evolves in a way that's completely appropriate for food system change. So often when I'm doing the work that I do and my colleagues do around Regather and Chef Food, one of the key issues that we identify is a lack of understanding really around food system thinking. And I've shared this slide here because obviously it's an incredibly simplified graphic representation of a food system. And if only food systems were as simple and as neat and as circular as that diagram suggests. Obviously they are not. But when you're talking with people who are part of I think several generations of complete disconnect from actually where food comes from, how it's produced, the impact of that production, and their role as not just customers, consumers, but also active participants in that food system. You really have to start to kind of deconstruct in order to then reconstruct it in a different way. And this is always the starting point. I have this printed on a piece of paper, and I will always carry it with me. And inevitably, when we're having conversations with individuals, particularly at a local authority, local government level, their appreciation of the food system is unfortunately still very, very limited. So these elements help them understand what constitutes a food system. And then often I will use this simple, again, very simple graphic. So this takes some of those and builds on them with prerequisites or elements. Okay, so it's about taking them on a journey about understanding how the food system operates. And then if they're really kind of getting to grips with the concepts and they're engaging with the conversation, then I find this is by far and away the most useful tool. So I found this on the internet. It wasn't complete in my view, so I worked with a graphic designer and we developed it, added in a number of components. It was very North American in terms of the language and certain components of the system. So this, could be adapted, I think, for any location in the same way that we've done. But for us, this is has the kind of constituent elements of a food system that we want to, explore and change. So as you can see, it's an ideal model. Getting those circular flows is an integral part of the circular economy approach, and understanding how those systems work is obviously an integral part of a systems thinking approach. And very quickly, I can use this tool to highlight certain ways in which systems are not circular in a particular context, and explain then how it is that they could be made circular. So just as a quick example, the biological system there, looking at how waste comes out of the kind of consumer end of the food system, or the manufacturing and processing end of the elements of the food system. And in Sheffield, unfortunately, a significant quantity of that is still sent to landfill or for energy recovery through incineration. And immediately, we're able to talk with people about the embedded calorific value being recovered through energy recovery, but then the nutritional or the organic kind of content of that not being recovered, and then explore other ways in which that could change, and what the impacts of that particular approach are, and what the opportunities could be for changing that. So it's about stimulating conversations, and obviously there are many other opportunities for that, particularly for example around farming inputs, which I will touch on shortly in the presentation. So moving on, so this food systems approach, so we're trying to educate people as we're walking through those slides, and essentially building their understanding of how a food system works, and equipping them with what they need to understand in order to explore opportunities for changing that in a positive way. So obviously we talk about food provision with some of the elements there that feature on the models. We can talk about dimensions, and exploring, particularly in that more complex model, those different circular flows and different components of the system. But then we're able to kind of move on to slightly more complex geographical and landscape level concepts, like a food shed. So much like a watershed, we talk about a food shed as the kind of productive capacity of a particular landscape, and the linkages that exist in order to make that productivity useful. So yeah, urban, peri-urban and rural linkages being key. Obviously we're talking about a Sheffield context all the time here, and exploring how the city relates to the peri-urban and rural agricultural landscapes around it are key for tackling how our food system works. And then we can move on to, I think, probably one of the most useful concepts. So we talk about food is not a thing, but food is a flow. And I'm sure this is familiar to everybody on the call here. But if you're talking to somebody who has no comprehension of actually how a food system works or could be changed, the idea of each meal, and I say, well, what did you have for breakfast? That day, and they're like, oh, well, I had this. And I say, well, think about what's embedded in the food that you ate. And they're like, okay. And immediately they'll be talking about ingredients. And I said, so where did you buy it? And they're like, okay, yeah, think about that, and so on. And the whole thing expands from there. And eventually we're able to start to think about that meal, each mouthful, as a collection of embedded flows. And this is obviously a really important learning experience for people to then engage with the circular economy concept. So a key element then for us at Regather to build on, once, as we establish that understanding, but from our point of view, actually putting into practice that systems thinking, is a values-based food chain. So this is basically what Regather does. We are producers and operators of values-based food chains, and key things here is about understanding the role of producers as strategic partners, not just interchangeable input suppliers, and very importantly, this is driven by what our customers want to see. They're after a values-based offer, and so that needs to demonstrate very clearly values such as fairness, provenance, and standards that are important to those customers. But one of the key kind of reasons as well for this approach, so we can see systems, food systems as a whole, but actually it's the chains, the connections within that food system that are the real drivers of potential change. So a values-based food chain is about creating novel connections within an existing system, making those economically viable, and then driving the growth of that enterprise to then drive the development and growth of those values-based food chains. So we do that all the time, every day. And for us in Sheffield, it's fantastic because that actually, that really roots us in our industrial heritage as a city. We're doing it with food now. We're doing it with various services and products that are about meeting the needs of our community. But you only have to go back, to the steel industry and the Little Messers tradition, and there was this whole configuration of flexible specialization and very dynamic connections and supply chains. So we're just continuing that, and this is what it is for us, is about values-based food chains now. So an example of that is our Regather box. So this is our core product at Regather. The figures, I maybe need to update those, but headline right now, we're serving over 700 households per week, which has more than doubled since March. So we've experienced a very rapid rate of growth, and we're employing over 20 people and turning over substantially more, and a lot of that turnover is then going back into the local food economy to our suppliers and producers. But it's the values in action that's important. That's what our customers come to us for, that unique relationship with Sheffield producers and regional producers through our wholesale supply chain. So it's about locality, seasonality, cooperation, and organic certificated food standards. Now, in contrast, and I thought it'd be useful just to kind of highlight, it's not just about putting stuff in a box and delivering it to a household. It can work in radically different ways. So another example of a values-based food chain, Fresh Street, Sheffield. So this was a public health pilot where we essentially, the intervention was to put cash into households. That cash was only available to spend on fresh fruit and vegetables, and that was only they were only able to spend that at certain places. So the markets in Sheffield, and also through a home delivery bag scheme, which sort of emulated certain aspects of the Regather box. And so, this is about cash going into households, increasing household income. It's about a direct sort of health-related intervention. It's about driving a value kind of transfer in the local economy around that transaction of cash for fruit and vegetables. So this demonstrates how values-based food chains can be configured in particular ways to achieve certain outcomes. That's what makes them the drivers of change. So what does that look like? So this is a representation of a kind of food system that exists or that's in development in Sheffield. So we have certain elements of those food system models, but they're embedded in real sites. So the different aspects of Regather's operation, or what we do with partners or strategic aims that we're working towards. And you can just see there the different elements in the middle, and then the food policy, food partnership wrapping around the outside. So looking at opportunities to change that environment in which we're functioning. I'll come back to this model briefly, just to kind of round things up. But what are the kind of headline issues? So in that system view, that very much embedded system in Sheffield, first key issue is access to land. So we're a densely populated urban area, fourth largest city in the UK, and access to land, the right kind of land, is really challenging. And even if you took all of the sites currently under organic horticultural food production, you will reach a grand total of 35.3 acres, okay, which is very, very small, and certainly doesn't achieve enough to significantly impact on local food supply. So there's this huge misconception because of the lack of understanding of how the food system really works. And even now, despite our best efforts to educate our customers, they still have this maybe romantic idea of where food comes from. So their box will arrive and they'll say, "Oh, how do you grow all of this on your allotment?" And they're like, there's this idea that we kind of, as a producer, as a local producer, we're on our allotment, which is a complete nonsense. And the reality is that we have a complex regional, national, and international supply chain, even for an organisation like Regather. That's what drives the supply of the fresh produce. So there's just this lack of appreciation that's driven primarily by the supermarket retail system. This food magically appears in metal boxes all around the country, and people drive to them in other metal boxes and get their food. Hey presto, it's amazing, but it's a lot more complex than that. So land is a major problem, and access to land is a really important part of our work. Also, the right kind of labour, and hearing previous speakers about the importance of local employment and local skills development, and it's exactly the same here in Sheffield. Where essentially a young person going to college, they will not be able to learn food horticulture. It's geared up for a particular form of agriculture, industrial agriculture, and that isn't what we need in urban and peri-urban locations to change our food system. So there's a labour supply crisis that we need to do something about. And then also the inputs. You might remember that very complex systems diagram right at the top. We had a whole range of farming inputs, and this is again very familiar territory to anybody understanding how agriculture and the food system works. But when you're in a particular situation, an urban context, then all of these really start to become major obstacles to developing a more sustainable food system. So the development of Regather Farm, it's a 15-acre site. That's taken a lot of time, a lot of money, because we started off with a bare field that had been intensively farmed for grain over 40, 50 years, ploughed several times a year, application of fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, soil health completely disregarded. And your starting point is a very, very damaged, degraded landscape, and to recover that landscape is a long and complex process, and it's all about the right kind of inputs. So accessing these inputs, creating these inputs in an urban or peri-urban situation is a lot easier said than done. And making that a viable business as well is even more challenging. Now, just to kind of continue that theme around inputs, so a bare field, formerly agricultural land, despite the major challenges that presents, if it's been intensively farmed for 40 or 50 years, that's actually a really good starting point if you compare it to a very much urban brownfield location, where you are sitting not within a natural or a semi-natural landscape. You're in an urban landscape, with an urban ecology, an urban ecosystem in operation. So you have to, we have to think about that in the context of urban food production. So looking at ways in which we can access the right type of water, what are the soil related issues? Is there soil? If there is soil, is it contaminated? If there isn't soil, how can we import it? How can we produce it? What are the sources of organic matter? What are the processes like anaerobic digestion that we need to engage in to create that growing medium? And then, light and heat. In an urban ecology, these are the opportunities. So, can we introduce artificial sources of light and heat? Can we bring in solar PV? Are there sources of urban heat and urban CO2 that are actually an advantage, a competitive advantage, if you are thinking about comparing that, say, to a rural site? So ultimately, what we're working towards is a fully integrated urban agriculture. So if we go back to that sort of very simplified model, how is it in that context, that we bring in the right kind of labor, access the right kind of land? What are the opportunities around those urban flows of heat, CO2, water? How is it that light can be harnessed in particular ways to extend and control the growing environment? Obviously soil absolutely essential and yet so challenging, but also huge opportunities around the development of soilless growing and also synthetic growing mediums as well. And inevitably, with the digital transformation of the food system, the role of data as well in pulling all of these components together and helping us, control each of those as part of a wider, more sustainable food system. So that's the kind of the work in progress of Regather and the role of Chef Food in this sort of food system transformation. And that's me done for slides. So I'm happy to take questions. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Gareth, for your excellent presentation. I'm sure there will be many questions that our audience would like to ask you. Would like to start with questions. I think Akis sent me a private message with a question he wanted to ask. No?
Yeah, I could ask something. I was wondering if you have considered the potential to, let's say, form some sort of collaboration with other organic stores in Sheffield that are offering similar service, like Beanies, for instance.
Yes, of course. I mean, we work very closely with Beanies, Zeds, Sheffield Organic Growers, Meersbrook, Moss Valley Market Garden, and so on. It's an informal relationship, I think is probably the best way of describing it, but it's very, very embedded. So yeah, it's a work. It's something that has huge potential. I think there are elements of the digital infrastructure that particularly Beanies, are as far as I'm aware, they've also experienced significant growth in their box scheme over the past few months, and there are elements of the wholesale supply chain, maybe customer interface, payment platforms, logistics platforms. There's a whole range of opportunities for sharing access to services. I think the challenges are around the kind of culture that each organization has. Beanies is a cooperative, so there's obviously shared values, and that's why we all already work very closely between us. But equally, we both value our autonomy and our independence, and it would be to sort of, move from where we are now to somehow merging or acquiring each other's business would be hugely complicated. But I think also there's a geography to the city, and there's also the relationship with the customers. And any business that ignores that relationship with the customer just to kind of make things more efficient, I think maybe misses a trick. You've got to bring the customers with you on that journey, I think. So, but yeah, there's huge potential. You're absolutely right. That's kind of the purpose of the food partnership, I think. So, sorry, Andrea.
Thank you.
Yeah, a couple more questions from Adrian, and I think they are very much follow-up questions. Adrian, would you like to?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Gareth, for this presentation. Now, the first question, okay, somehow it's tangent with what you already replied. And some of us, we were actually thinking if there is generally a big challenge in engaging the urban stakeholders in facilitating all your work, but you partly answered it. Just besides other, let's say, food players, what about the other type of stakeholders? For example, consumer groups, public authorities. Is there any challenge in keeping them interested, let's say, in supporting you?
I think they're great questions, and they sit at the heart of the challenge that the food partnership approach is really trying to kind of address. It's very easy to link in kind of a business to business relationship with small scale food producers, food processors, but there is a much greater need and it's much more challenging to then link with other food system actors, and of course ultimately the wider population, because it's their behavior that drives not just the negative behaviors that exist, but also that's where the potential for change sits, around changing public behavior essentially. And I think that's why the food partnership is essential, and finding the kind of shared agenda. So if you're going to a local authority, it's absolutely critical to recognise that they have a very, very substantial workload around their statutory responsibilities. The local authorities exist to achieve certain responsibilities on behalf of national government, on behalf of the population. And it's very easy, particularly with food, to kind of have what are essentially unrealistic expectations of certain stakeholders. Equally, finding certainly at a regional level, the agendas like net zero. So, energy, transport, housing, these real big picture issues are very, very high on the list of priorities, as you'd expect. But food, is just inherently more complex, and sort of often falls between multiple kind of big picture concepts, and that always slightly confuses me, because food is essential to our existence, and we interact with it hopefully at least 3 times a day, right? So it's important that we do that kind of engagement. There's a role to play at an anchor institution level with procurement policy, procurement frameworks, which I think is there's plenty of room for development around those particular types of issues. Some really exciting stuff going on elsewhere in the country around dynamic food procurement, which is about changing the procurement system in order to enable some of the kind of reconfiguration of supply chains that underpin a more sustainable food system. So it's challenging at the best of times, but the partnership approach is I think the best way of achieving some of those relationships, right?
Excellent, super. This clarifies both questions. Thank you.
Akis, you wanted to ask something else?
I wrote it down as well. Just following up Adrian's inquiry, is there any particular distribution channel you use in order to cover up demand in case of shortages?
Well, our box, we buy as much locally grown produce as is available on the market. So if there are local producers producing organic fruit and vegetables, then they have a customer in Regather. Okay. Now the quantity of produce nowhere near meets the level of demand that exists for that type of produce in Sheffield. And even if you take ourselves and Beanies and maybe, let's say, another 2 or 3 independent retailers that are selling Sheffield grown organic produce, right? It's such a small amount of on the supply side that we all have to go into the regional wholesale supply chains to make up the difference between what is grown locally and the demand for locally grown produce. So this is what's driving the growth of a local Sheffield market garden sector. But in order to achieve that, we have to access the land, access the skills, get the inputs right, and so on. So that's the kind of makeup of our supply chain. So in terms of shortages, we already accommodate regular changes in the local short supply chains, and we do that through our regional wholesalers. And so if we're going to experience any shortages, which I don't think we will do, those supply chains are robust, and the kind of quantities that we're dealing with, even at a city level, are still very small. But it would be at the regional wholesale level that we would have to change what we're doing currently. Now, it suddenly starts getting much more complicated there because you're dealing with the food supply system at a regional or national or UK, EU kind of level. I suppose the UK as a whole is vulnerable to the challenges, and certainly we'll see some of those play out in the spring. There's no doubt about it. But fingers crossed, our regional wholesalers will weather that storm. But I think I don't want to kind of create this expectation, this unrealistic expectation that somehow we're going to replace the supply that we rely on at a regional or national level with a local supply. It's just completely unrealistic, in the current way of producing, to make a substantial impact on food supply. The transformation that's needed to achieve impactful levels of food supply at a very local level is currently not happening. It's as simple as that, and there's this romantic notion that local food production is going to be the thing that makes the difference. It's not. That what it will make a difference on is reconnecting people with a food system that, through driving behavior change, could be more sustainable at a national and at a global level, because it's that relationship that's been lost, and there are ways of connecting with people around food that we don't do, that if we did do, people's behavior would be different. And I think that's what's going to drive change on the demand side, and then we can pick up the supply side.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. And Tommaso for the final question.
Yes, a question on the demand side. You already said that the demand is much bigger than the supply. So, but my question was: is there a particular niche of customers that, for example, at the beginning, before you existed, at the beginning of your company you addressed, and what communication channel did you use to reach them, this first
Fantastic.
customer?
So the Regather box started as a group of maybe 10 or 15 households interested in accessing a better value of organic fresh produce. Okay, so at the time, the options available to us were there were some, there were other box schemes in existence both in Sheffield and nationally, but what we identified, because we're cooperators, was that if we cooperated and collectively purchased an amount of fresh fruit and vegetables through a wholesaler, then we would be able to get better value for our money, and we would also have a better understanding of the supply chain and the provenance of that. So that was the kind of that core group of people. That's the starting point for the box scheme. But it's really important to recognize that one of the drivers of Regather as a business has been events and festivals. So a cultural program that has involved music and artistic work, a whole range of kind of cultural activity and a cultural offer that has got people who have similar values into the same space, the same time, talking with each other, which has then enabled us to communicate opportunities such as the box to turn those values into a changed behavior. Yeah. So the communication channels are primarily events based. Okay. So Regather started as an events business. And so we were running festivals and we had an idea of what we wanted to see that was different in the local economy. And then we moved to kind of realize that change using the food sector and the food system as a way of demonstrating a different set of economic values in action. Okay. And so food, it could have been banking, it could have been healthcare, it could have been education, but the barriers to entry for those sectors are much higher in order for us to then put into practice a particular set of values and a set of cooperative and community wealth building principles. Now, explaining it like that, it sounds really easy, but it was an evolution. It was quite iterative, and it took quite a long time, and there's a fair amount of luck. Okay, because but the key thing is, and this is something we've always said about Regather, we made a model out of not knowing what we wanted to do. Okay, so it was a model that allowed other people to come in with skills, experience, and interests and values, and it just so happened that what's emerged is a form of food system change around a particular business model. Now, I think that says something about food. It says something about how it is that people, given the opportunity to kind of get their hands on something and do things differently, will gravitate towards those things at the bottom of the hierarchy of needs, right? You sort of like, where do we need the change? You address the basics first, and then it kind of works upwards. So there was no guided business plan. Okay, and I feel like that's something that, again, is like, you need to explode that myth, I think, but that's just from experience, and you can target a particular value set, you can target a particular economic model, you can maybe operate within a particular sector, but to say that you can somehow neatly identify a customer group and then say this is the right product for you, that's a kind of business model that involves, I think, large sums of money, many misses, one or two hits, And inevitably, the way in which that needs financing, and inevitably the way in which it ends up being owned and governed, the wealth creation that occurs in that model, it doesn't underpin circularity. It doesn't underpin community wealth building. It underpins profit extraction and value creation for a minority elite. Okay, and so you've got to turn it on its head and make it work at a particular level in order to then build it in the right way and in the right direction.
Okay, thank you very much, Gareth, and it was an excellent presentation that stimulated great discussion. So, of course, as you are part of the Proceeds project and very much involved with things we are doing, we'll keep in touch, and I'm sure there will be an occasion to follow up on the things that have emerged from your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And we can now move to the final speaker of this very interesting session that we are having. So we should have Jake and Graham from FairShare. Don't know if they are here. I can see Graham is here. We can make him a presenter. And let me see if I manage to find Jake. Yeah, also Jake is here. So another great presentation from a charitable organization which operates in the northeast of England, which deals with food surplus redistribution. So over to you, Jake, and looking forward to learning from you.
Hi everyone, and thanks for having me along. So I hope you can all hear me okay. I have got a warehouse just the other side of the office wall, so it might be a little bit noisy. Just give us a shout if it's too much at any points. So yeah, I'm the Chief Exec at FairShare Northeast, and we are part of the UK's largest charity fighting hunger and food waste. FairShare as a whole across the country operates effectively on a franchise model, and we operate that here in the Northeast. Obviously, every part of the FairShare network operates slightly differently, so everything that I'm about to present in these slides is kind of applicable to the Northeast and maybe slightly different depending on where you are. And I know we've got FairShare Yorkshire that covers Sheffield and other areas around there, so some slight differences between us, but we've all fundamentally got the same goal, and that is to redistribute surplus food to frontline charities to support vulnerable people. Just a brief kind of like diagram there, just to give an idea of what the network looks like. So we're taking surplus food from the food industry with the help of our volunteers. We then redistribute that to frontline community groups. They in turn then turn that into nutritious meals to feed thousands of people every week. We work with a range of different suppliers in the food industry. So we've actually got over 500 different suppliers that we're working with right across the food industry. Lots of those are built into the supermarket supply chain, but there are some local suppliers as well. You can see Greg's there in the middle, they're obviously a Northeast supplier. And yeah, it's a complete mix and variety of food that we do get coming through. Obviously, the food that comes our way comes direct from the industry itself, so it tends to come in full pallet quantities. So it's quite large volumes that we're dealing in, and for the most part, it's kind of larger quantities than any one of our community groups that we work with would be looking to use. So that's where our volunteers come in. As the food arrives in the warehouse in Newcastle, we then pick, pack, and sort the food ready to go out to the community groups. The idea being that we kind of share it into more usable quantities that are then appropriate to the member groups that we're working with. We've got a fleet of delivery vans, so we've currently got 6 delivery vans on the road that cover the Northeast, and we do have the option for people to collect food as well from the warehouse if they're based nearby. Why should we redistribute surplus food, and why could that be a possible solution to waste in the industry? Obviously, food waste in the UK is a major problem. These stats are a couple of years old now, but it's still obviously a major problem. So we use RAP for a lot of our figures, and they estimate there's 1.9 million tonnes of food waste in the UK, of which 270,000 tonnes is edible. Fair Share operates with a relatively small part of that, but that is growing, and we are always looking to try and access more. If you take that 270,000 tonnes and look at that in a meal equivalent, that's 650 million meals that is going to waste every year. So that's an enormous amount of food. We basically take as much of that food as we can and share that with our members. So just to give an idea of what the groups are getting, our members receive an average of around 80 to 100 kilos of food delivered every week. So that's around the equivalent of a supermarket trolley's worth. In financial terms, it's probably about £150 worth of food in value, although obviously that does vary, same as the weight kind of each week, depending on what surplus we have. We always try and work with our members to understand their needs. We don't want to send them food that isn't suitable to them, but obviously we need to sort of work with surplus, and our primary goal is to reduce food waste. Once we've put together an allocation for our members, they've got the option to either get it delivered to them or collect. We find that the charities we work with, a lot of them are quite sort of time poor. They're obviously busy, they're doing a lot of work in their community. So having the option of a delivery there can actually save them time as well. So it's about not just reducing food waste, but providing that convenience as well. And the kind of groups that we work with, so it's absolutely anything from breakfast clubs to after school clubs. It could be food banks, pantries, social supermarkets. It's a real mix and variety. It could basically be any group that works with food in a sort of a not-for-profit kind of way. We're really keen to try and work with as many different groups as possible. In terms of the supply chain, obviously we're working mostly to the RAP food waste hierarchy. So at the very top, obviously prevention, that's the best step. So if the waste or the surplus doesn't happen in the first place, that's obviously absolutely ideal. But then the next step is kind of where we come in with that redistribution. And then our entire operation is built around that, kind of trying to redistribute first as an absolute priority, but then doing absolutely everything that we can to try and like avoid that disposal at the very bottom of the hierarchy. So where that top level of prevention fails, that's where we come in with the redistribution. And to give an idea of what we've achieved in the North East over the last year, between January and November, we've worked with the 500 national suppliers that I've mentioned previously. Here in the North East alone, we've received 1,765 tonnes of food. So into meal equivalents, that's 4.2 million meals. We've worked with an average of 208 groups every month, and they in turn obviously work with people that are accessing their services. That's the equivalent of 22,000 people every week. We've done all that maintaining a waste level of just 2.25%. And then referring back to that waste hierarchy as well, we're working with Keenan Recycling, a food waste collection agency, and we work with local farmers as well to try and, again, kind of close that loop and stop it going to landfill. With all that, obviously, there's some items that we just can't find a home for. So in particular, we're finding glass quite challenging. So food that comes in glass products, if there's any damage in the supply chain, that pretty much has to go to disposal. It can't really go into anaerobic digestion, certainly can't go to animal feed. So that's quite a challenging one for us to deal with. We're also finding that single-use fruit and veg trays are quite a challenge as well. They tend to be very mixed plastic. It's very low grade and they're intended to be sort of single use. So trying to find an avenue for those has been quite a challenge, but we are working on that. And then apart from that, it's really just a sort of like the basic kind of like non-recyclable waste that we generate operating the warehouse. Aside from that, we're working our very best towards being zero landfill. Areas for, I suppose, future potential research, the community groups that we're sending the food to, we don't really know how much of the food that they get goes to waste. But what we are looking to try and do is build proactive partnerships that see surplus food as a sort of an opportunity rather than a problem. We want to have groups that could get, say, a butternut squash, for example, and rather than sort of look at that as an issue or a challenge, to kind of look at it as an opportunity. And we've worked with groups in some quite challenging parts of Newcastle where we've initially sent them food that they've not been keen keen to work with, or not even had the knowledge of how to sort of work with that. And we've been as proactive as we can with them to try and change those kind of views of food, I suppose, and rather than see it as something that that they try and dispose of rather than work with, we're really encouraging them to try and actually take that food. So that was just a very quick overview of kind of what FareShare's doing. I think Graham's got a few more slides to look at other aspects as well.
Thank you, Jake. Over to you, Graham.
Okay. So, can everybody see that? Yes.
Yeah, we can see and hear you. That's fine.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to just give you a bit of background and say that I actually started at FareShare as a volunteer when I became involved because when I was moving universities, I had several weeks leave to use. So I used this leave working for FareShare. And I was working in the warehouse and working out on the road, which sort of supported my professional pre-academic career in supply chain management, engineering, systems development. And it became very clear to me very quickly that just because you've got the best of intentions and you want to do good things doesn't mean you're any good at it. So what we had was we had a lot of lovely people that wanted to do a lot of good things, but they just weren't achieving that. What they needed was somebody that wasn't particularly lovely, but had good engineering systems development knowledge and what have you. And that was me. So, and then I was fortunate, we were all fortunate enough that I was introduced to Jake, because what Jake doesn't tell you, there's a couple of things that Jake doesn't tell you, is that we've gone from a franchise model that was basically the worst one in the UK to the best one in the UK. That is typified by this average waste of 2.25%. We've seen almost a tripling in volume as a result of COVID, the impact of COVID. But because of the operations management structures that Jake has put in and developed, we've got a very, very robust franchise now. So what I want to do is I want to sort of build on that and say, we don't just think, right, what's next? Everything we do, there is a theoretical context, and we look at these as both problems and opportunities, and how they drive overall social contributions around food justice, food democracy, addressing food poverty, urban food deserts, that sort of thing. And I'm extremely proud to be part of FareShare Northeast, even though I live in the Northwest now. And even more than that, I'm extremely proud of the work that Jake has done. So if I can just sort of go through these and give you some context. So the background is significant growth of food banks, people engaging with emergency food supply for all different factors that are linked to things like rent increases, wage stagnation, changes to benefit systems, flexible terms of employment. In the UK, we've got a particular problem with 0 hours contracts, which are touted by people that use 0 hours contracts to reflecting some of the flexibility that people may require, but are actually just a really good way of driving costs out of the operation and placing a lot of uncertainty on the shoulders of people that work under 0 hours contracts. So as a result of these things, which I suppose if it had started, their emergence can be tracked back to the start of the last major economic downturn, 2008, 2009 sort of thing. You've had this, you've got an ad hoc supply network with concerned actors, which is good because it sort of validates that you've got people within a social actor network theory that want to do this stuff, but just because they want to do this stuff doesn't mean they're any good at it. And on top of that, whilst they're not also as not be operationally efficient, what have you, you've got things like scale, scope, you've got supply volumes that change on an almost daily basis, be too much stuff and then not enough stuff, and then that's impacted by seasonal factors around availability and what have you. People don't particularly do efficient inventory management, with the exception of Newcastle. And as a result of that, some of the organisations that supply, not just FairShare, but Trussell Trust and others, can be quite opportunistic in that they see some advantage to moving very, very short-dated stock where they know that really nothing's going to happen with it, but you've moved your waste rather than paying a landfill charge for that waste. And you're also able to say, well, I'm also, by moving my waste, I'm complying with the regulations around waste packaging and producer responsibility regulations. There are ways in which these various people in the sectors could work together better, but they don't. So what we're saying is that there's a lot of noise here, and also you're getting what I call the Daily Mail effect, where people are becoming outraged about the amount of food banks, not the fact that we've got food banks, because in terms of sustainability and proper circular economy, food banks aren't the answer at all. A proper circular sort of position here is that we provision efficiently, but as part of provisioning efficiently, that also means education, training, development into community-supported agriculture, all these different things. So food banks per se are not the answer, but there's an emergent political rhetoric around food banks, and it completely ignores the fact that there are lots of established food reprovisioning networks out there. We've got breakfast clubs, we've got mobile provisions of soup kitchens, that sort of thing. We've got stationary kitchens where people can come to at certain times of day. As I say, we've got school breakfast clubs, all these different things. So a natural progression of what we hope to do, in fact, I think Jake will be able to tell you some more about this, is to actually take over on-site or close by cafes and canteens and start doing training through them, using our food, all that sort of thing. The last thing we want to do is put anything in the ground whatsoever. And there's also the fact that there are many faith-based projects that have been around for many, many, many years that people conveniently overlook and decide to get all angry about food banks. So theoretical context here, things that drive our research is we believe that what we're doing is, because we get the operations management perspective right and the supply chain management perspective right, that we can start to overcome barriers where you've got this intricate food citizenship landscape. We've got many multiple stakeholders in which we've changed the way in which they can see inventory and what we can offer to them so the right people get the right food. And based on our own experiences, that there is this is a growing opportunity to say that we can adapt resource dependency theory here, and as part of adapting resource dependency theory, we can have a more sustainable food citizenship system, which is fair, and it also drives distributive justice and addresses market failure. Because let's face it, we only get this stuff to be reprovisioned as a result of market failure. And that's because despite the many, many hundreds of millions of pounds that are spent every year in the UK on forecasting software, forecasting platforms, data analysis and what have you, we're still wasting hundreds of thousands of tons, 1.9 million tons. So for the academics on this call, that's great because that keeps us in a job. But for people from look at this as a missed opportunity, it's very much a missed opportunity for social entrepreneurship, if nothing else. So we feel that resource dependency theory could be adapted here so that we can develop a model based on the good stuff that's going on at Newcastle for it to be generalizable and be used by other franchises and basically by anybody else that wants to sort of build upon our good practice, our success. And we'll have to do that around the background of everything we push through these more efficient systems of redistribution has to comply with legislature. So it has to be brought in, stored, managed, distributed in accordance to food safety. So we need that trackability and traceability, which frankly we didn't have in the past, but we do now as a result of the fantastic work that Jake has done. As I said, good intentions are not enough. You need solid operations management and good supply chain management. Without that, you've just got lots of lovely people that are not being as efficient as they can. So another sort of out the back of that, I've thought, well, what are we doing here? And I've sort of gone back to, I wrote a paper quite a few years ago with one of my colleagues from Sheffield that looked at supply chain risk management for food. And supply chain risk management for food is still very much based on value chain 2. So before value chain 1, or the original value chain, it's rooted in historical perspectives of producer and wholesale spot market activity. It is some way, these value chains in some way have been adapted to look at sort of all the rents that occur in the production of that food. Value chain 2 came along. Now we've got contract farming, longer term supply agreements. And let's face it, you need some of those longer term supply agreements. If you've got, if you're going to go into sort of tree-borne fruit or bush-borne fruit, it's going to be between 3 and 5 years before you start getting any sort of reasonable return. So you want longer contracts, or you're just not going to do it. However, what you've got here is that you've got this standardization is sort of driven of monopsony. That's great. What it does do is it reduces if you think the bell curve of distribution, then it reduces the likelihood of food being produced which falls out of those accepted standards. So that's a good way of addressing waste, but it sounds a death knell for regional food types and what have you. Other things that drive this, you'll have part of these supply agreements will it'll tell you about fertilizer regimes, semen lines, parent and grandfather and flock restrictions, which, there's an argument that these restrictions are sort of counter to open competition. There's another argument that says, well, for example, what semen selection does in the beef industry allows a significant reduction in the amount of male calves born of dairy herds, which are for want of a better term, euthanized within days at the farm. So they're just, they're extracted from the herd at a few days old and killed and destroyed on the farm. So there's an argument that this being able to standardize reduces that terrible thing occurring. But however, you can, this is a scale thing, because these activities don't exactly scale down well. So we need to find something that does scale down well, so the community-supported agriculture is something that becomes more important, as we've seen in the previous presentation, but one. So off the back of that, I've started thinking about a third value chain. Obviously, I'm blowing smoke out of my own backside when I call it Heron's Value Chain 3. It'll just be, it's proposed and it's going to be published as a mid-range theory that just says Value Chain 3, not my Value Chain 3. But what we've got now is got potential to trigger and sustain more efficient systems, give you greater sort of visibility and penetration of data. Basic web technologies would allow this, and what it allow the people that reprovision and the people that are creating these chances for reprovisioning inventory to emerge to work closer with each other. So they are getting earlier interventions. However, I do note that whilst you can better commoditize data to get a more resilient and inclusive reprovisioning system, it's going to largely be based upon an organisation's attitudes to resilience, sustainability and ethical food supply chains. So in the UK, I'm talking about the Co-op and Waitrose and Lidl and Aldi. They're where we're likely to see it come from first. At a regional level, I'm already seeing some stuff occur with booths in the Northwest. And the reason why this is important is because, if you think about things from the start of this morning, they were very much about, okay, this is what we can do to sort of get stuff to market more sustainably. So the stuff that we do at FairShare and the reprovisioning and the stuff that drives this research acknowledges the fact that by the time it gets to market, it's already had an environmental impact in terms of its production phases and processing phases, and it has commodity-led value. So, but in relation to that food, as it works through the supply chain, over various multiple time periods based on the type of food, its characteristics, its plant shelf life, all that sort of thing, you basically have a steady commodity value and they have a steady environmental impact value. But as they reach the end of their lives, then two things begin to occur. You start to get a rapid deterioration in its commodity value, and you get a rapid increase in its environmental impact if it actually makes its way to landfill. So our research is looking to see that we get an earlier intervention so that we can offset the likelihood of waste occurring by being given access to proxy data, so we can start to plan to move things around more efficiently. Even where we can't move things around more efficiently, to be able to say with the data that this clearly indicates this particular offering should actually go to this particular digester station, what have you, therefore also decreasing the amount of environmental stresses through road transport in terms of noise pollution, air pollution, rubber pollution, iron particle pollution. that sort of thing, and reducing the amount of overall road trips. So this is just another perspective of that data, but it clearly shows the sort of decrease and increase that we'll have to address. So some of my recent research, which we hope to push on our research with FareShare here, is I've recently done some research that I was asked to do as part of the interventions that DEFRA came up with as a result of COVID. And what I did is I looked at the way that DEFRA reacted, and it wasn't particularly good. And in fact, the Department of Transport wasn't particularly good as well. So I went away, I interviewed a number of organisations, and it became clear that those organisations with a higher degree of vertical integration, where you think this is lean, this is agile, this is just in time, actually everything they tell you is counter to being lean and agile, because where there's a high degree of integration, the people are very much against failure. So the hedge, and every time they hedge, they create an opportunity for waste to occur. So you've got this high degree of integration, and because you've got this high degree of integration, you've got asymmetric risks which occur, and those asymmetric risks are pushed back up the supply chain. One of my suppliers, if I was still back out in industry, if one of my suppliers failed, yeah, you know, it'd be okay, I'll get around it. But if it's the other way around, then that supplier itself, it has a devastating effect on them. So what can we do in terms of being able to extract data from vendor managed inventory systems, category management systems, and what have you, to stop using it as a risk avoidance strategy, but to start to use it as a way to engage earlier in reprovisioning. So these are the organisations that I looked at and have based my report on for EFRA. And as we looked at food service, multiple retailers, supermarkets, looked at low integration and medium integration, high integration and producers and what have you. And then I had to look at FareShare ourselves. So the interesting thing here is that where, particularly in terms of the multiple retailer DC, they acknowledged all this. I said, yes, these are all perfectly reasonable, and yes, we agree with them. But then they said it wasn't their problem. They just, oh, it's not our problem. And each one of these drives an opportunity for reprovision. So the best way we can see this in terms of a circular economy is that we can alternatively view these as nodes in a food supply chain where reprovisioning opportunities are likely to occur. And we can then take a more hierarchical approach to working with these organizations, so that by being able to engage with them slightly earlier, we actually will reduce waste and will have more social benefit. I'm a social entrepreneur. It's not about profit for me, it's about prefer. And you know, if you can't do something for somebody that can't do anything for you, that's a pretty miserable place to be in personally. However, extending it out, move away, if we can do this, we can move away from these dyadic exchanges of donation to a more relational approach, where you get, now we're bringing in theories of relationship marketing, and that they in turns will support an adaptation of resource dependency theory. Before you go to sleep, this will allow relationships to become balanced and more symmetrical, move away from the historical unbalanced and asymmetrical relationships, where you've had munificence and scarcity on day to day. Because you've basically got data blindness. And if you've got data blindness, then you have to be reactive and agile. And everybody here that all the academics here know that being reactive and agile in operations management drives opportunities for waste to occur. So you think, I'm not going to get caught out again, so I'll build extra inventory, which drives opportunities for more waste to occur. And then you push a lot of that risk up on your supply base. So what this would give us, it would give us a more proactive food reprovisioning approach, and it would allow us to restore value equilibrium. And these are not pie in the sky ideas. All we're doing here is we are taking the approach that we've taken to having good operations management processes in place at Fairshare Northeast, having a brilliant, beyond brilliant regional director in Jake. And if anybody can help me with a cloning program, we need to get them into one. And it's just building, it's basically starting with what the operation looks like, what a sustainable supply chain looks like, what can we do to reprovision. And that's it from me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was very, actually, very, very detailed and very, very comprehensive. And I can definitely say that you really show how all the actual science, and the proper, let's say, scientific insights helps you to succeed with all your work. And it's really, really impressive to see how this is taken to practice, and should be a very good source of inspiration for the researchers, for the 15 researchers involved in this project, with a very, very similar task, at least for this week and then later on in life. Just one quick question that I was actually asked, that I collected from the audience. Is actually, there are several things combined, but I'll try to put it in one comprehensive and quick question. How do you deal with so much, let's say, so much available information, science, theory, and how do you know which one is the right one when you take it in practice, when you take it to the business side, let's say, in the sense that how to diminish the risk? Because there are so many solutions out there. There are so many types of interventions, let's say. How do you know how to select and when to take the risk in order to take something from the scientific world and put it in practice in order to make it work, especially in a social enterprise context?
Okay, well, the easiest way to address this is if you are, for example, if I go one stage back up the supply chain to a regional distribution center or a distribution center, that regional distribution center or distribution center itself will perpetually undertake a system of physical inventory management. And because they are reasonably good at physical inventory management, they can identify stuff which is becoming very short-dated and which then has value for reprovisioning. It's basically the stuff that we get. Or this could be returned customer order, or it could even be a take-back agreement where the RDC or the DC is saying, we don't need this, we'll take it back. Now, both being still very, very engaged with industry and my own industrial experience, you don't just say, right, we need to get away with this. That waste becomes an activity, an accounting-based activity. So actually, for you to get your stock level right, you have to write that waste off. You have to say, this is how much we thought we had for this period of time. Actually, this is how much we have. And that difference between the two becomes the stock waste. And that stock waste becomes reprovisioned opportunities for us. So you know to the single stock keeping unit how much you are removing from your inventory system. We never get that information. It's basic referential data. And that basic referential data, it would be incredible if we could get somebody to take that, say you are running SAP or SAP HANA, you could take that report and download it into an Excel spreadsheet and send it to us. And we would know what was coming, where it was coming to, how much of it was, and the reason why it had been removed from saleable stock items. So So you can, any major ERP system, warehousing management system, everything out there has the ability to download into both Excel, or even if you're the smallest food bank, you can download it into Google and it's free information. And off the back of that, you can do your planning more efficiently, you can do your forecasting more efficiently, you can bring your volunteers in at the busiest times, do them more efficiently, which, by the way, is something that Jake has pioneered for UK Fair Share. Just being able to, we don't expect any third-party organisation or charity to bear the overheads of a complex ERP system. What we're saying is they all generate downloadable data into Excel or Google Sheets that is so valuable elsewhere to people like us and to reduce environmental stresses.
Excellent. Thank you very much. This makes a lot of sense, and you actually covered another question as well that we had. So thank you very much once again for your great presentation and time and dedication that you give to this project. We really appreciate your contribution. So thank you very much once more.
Thank you.
I believe for everyone now we can take 15-minute break, and then we will resume with a very short presentation, 20-25 minutes maximum, from Professor Ketikili. So let's go on a 15-minute break. Okay.
Yeah, so we can come back at 12:30 UK time with Panos talk. So let's restart at 12:30. Okay.
This conference will now be recorded.
Adrian, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
But you cannot see me, right?
No, but it's okay. You can share the screen.
Okay.
And
people, they know, okay, my face, because something wrong with my camera now, even though it shows. Okay, good. Let's start. The last one. I hope you are not exhausted after so many days. The last session is, I will try briefly in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, we'll see how it goes, but not more than that, to discuss about the different types of investors and how to approach them. So let's go one by one. So the first thing that I would like, if possible, to understand the different cycles, stages of funding. We will discuss the different sources of funding because one does not fit all, and I will explain why. Who are these different type of investors, how to approach them, and so on. Let's start with this. Now, this is the cycle of when you have the idea, and at some point you may ask for some money in order to grow up the idea for something that you would like to buy, maybe to hire more personnel or to buy equipment or something else, depends on the type of the company that you have in mind. So you heard about the valley of death down here. The valley of death is actually when someone has an idea, and the idea is, they think the idea is great, and they want that idea to make it a service, product, whatever we said is innovation, but they don't have any finance, and that idea unfortunately stays either in the library or on a piece of paper because of funding. So that's why these people actually, they're in early states, we call it seed funding. They are very important, not that idea to die. I will explain as it goes. Then we have the first phase of the startup, the second phase, the third phase, until you go, hopefully all of them, that they start a company as a founders, entrepreneurs, they want to go IPO, to go to stock market, with other words. Okay. Now, check this slide, and on the left here you see.
Sorry, actually, I'm not sure if you're sharing the screen properly, because there's no.
What are you seeing now?
No, nothing. Try again to share the screen, please.
Okay, let me go back. Mm-hmm. Thank you for this. Let me see, where is it? Okay, sir. What you see? You see now things moving?
Yeah, now it's okay. Make
it's
it full
moving,
screen.
Yeah? Okay, yeah. So you didn't see anything?
No, only in the beginning, and then it's disappeared for some reason.
Okay. What about this? Have you seen that?
It's okay. You can proceed now.
I'll go back from here.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, good. Let me then go a little bit back. The most important thing of this diagram is to see here the valley of death. Why we call it, as I said, valley of death? Because that idea may die if you don't have usually who funds that? Your friends, we call it 3 Fs. The first friends, family, and fools. You have an idea, and this idea actually, because they like you very much, and they don't want your idea to die, they are coming and say, okay, how much money you need for this thing? 10,000, 5,000 euros, I'll give you the money so you can keep going, okay? And then, of course, is the first one. Second, I'll explain as we go. Now, this slide, you see on the left here, we have high. So when you have an idea, the risk of someone investing to your idea, it's very high. And usually, as I said, is either you with your own money. In the buzzword they use it in the startup world, they use it bootstrap, your own money, your friends, or your family, your grandmother, as I say, okay? Then as you move, to go to more established, okay, maybe the people of business angels are coming. Then, of course, the venture capital are coming, if you have sales, and then, of course, the other, equity markets and commercial banks. Now, this is actually an indicative thing. When you have an idea, it could go from, the concept idea. Maybe I could not say now your business canvas because it's very early. But if you have a little bit, if you had another week, to mature your business canvas, then you will have a nice concept idea with some indications that you did some validation, with, the people, the customers, the people that you actually check your idea. And then at that point, someone could give you, from 5,000, to 50,000, we call it, okay. And at that time, when you move to the next one, and you have, this identify the proof of concept, target market, and you have, some business plan, and you are working on your working prototype, then the angel investors, I will explain you who is angel investor. We call them business angel investors later on. And as you go, you see, if you are doing something else, the early stage venture, and then it goes out. Hopefully, the dream of every founder actually to come to the later stage and do an exit. Okay, exit means to sell the company and get equity. So this is actually the stages. Good. Now, from my experience, I see people that founders of startups, when they go and pitch, as you will do tomorrow, they ask you, okay, you ask for some money, and then they ask, okay, what you will do with that money? Let's suppose 50,000 euros, and they say, okay, what are you going to do with the money? You have to be well prepared because the investors, and usually people that they pay with their own pockets, not other people's money, they want to know where their money they would go, okay, because they invest on you, they invest on your idea. So you have to be very clear, for example, that I need supplies, for 6 months, and that I need, 10,000, equipment, for the 6 months, and I need 20,000, and legal fees because maybe I have an IP patent that I want actually to patent my idea, and that will cost, let's say, 30,000. Okay, so you have to be careful and to know when you ask for money where this money they would go, because the investors they will ask you about it. Now, there are several sources of funding, and you have to be ready and to ask for this money depending on the maturity of your idea. Okay. The suggestion that I'm giving usually is to use whatever we call it bootstrap. Maybe we had some, savings since you believe in your project. Okay, if you had some savings, to use these savings, for example, for your idea, or even if your grandmother left you, a car, maybe you can sell it and use it, for your idea. In order, or maybe if there is some accelerators or incubators in the city that you live, that they give you, some free of charge and some maybe initial funding, use that one. Okay. So this is the first thing that actually is the bootstrapping. Then is the family, friends, and fools. I will explain you as we go. Credit card, if you have a credit card, maybe you can use it. Business angels, I will explain. Incubators, I said. Crowdfunding, venture capital, EU funding, corporate funding. Sometimes there are regional fundings, in the regions that you live, and so on. So you have to identify the funding that you need and what are the different sources that they exist in order to keep your dream, to keep your company moving and stay alive. Okay, that's the idea. Now, if I would ask you, think about it, what is your key takeaway so far? What you would say? Okay, so you remember the slides, okay, and not all of you will have the same key takeaway, maybe, but you must have one key takeaway from this slide so far. Now, bootstrapping. If you never heard this term, okay, that's fine. You should not know this term because it's actually before you seek capital from others, you need to truly explore everything you can do with your own resources. Okay, why you are doing this? Because if you go very early and you have a brilliant idea, then imagine that a business angel or an investor comes to you and say, okay, great idea, how much you need? 50,000. And the idea is great. And then actually we'll get some equity from your idea, okay, from your company, from your startup. And that is not good, at that stage, to give equity to people, because then you will need, another stage for funding, another stage, and then of course your equity will go, you will lose, you will have less than 50%, that you were the founder. So this is something that you have to explore. First of all, to explore it very, very much, but there is not a magic, formula for all these the things that I will say, but just to know what tools exist out there. Banks, of course, they are not risk takers. You remember I showed you, the diagram. So they will not give you money for something that you don't have any track record. So it will be very reluctant to let, due to the limited track record of your company, because you don't have any sales, you don't have anything, to show them, they want to see numbers. Okay, they're very quantitative. Personal investors, as I said, there are these 3 Fs, the friends, family, and fools, that they give usually to someone because, my granddaughter or my grandson has a great idea, and okay, I will give the money. So they are mostly emotionally to you, not they don't look so much the idea that you have. Okay, because also it's why it's risky, and we say the 3 F's: friends, family, and fools, because at that time, you don't have this entrepreneurial experience and knowledge, and you don't know all the phases, until you break even. That's why when they say usually it will be nice to have some good mentors or entrepreneurs that they had a company, they went through all these phases in order to help you out. Okay. But the goal of these 3 F's is they want you to see you succeed. They do not focus on their returns. Okay. Another thing is the government. Okay. Usually go for the money, but do not lose focus of your idea. Because if you lose focus of your idea of what you want to do with this new baby, as I call it, your business idea, then actually you will be very distracted. So if this idea and the government give you some money for that idea without changing the vision that you have for the idea, then go for that money. Otherwise, you will be very distracted, I would say. Try to find other sources of funding. Okay. But they also have specific requirements. Crowdfunding, if you never heard this term, is something, like a platform that someone puts your idea there. People see it from all over the world and say, okay, I want to invest, usually depends, 10, euros, 100 euros, and so on, and they get some equity. Most of the people that they get to the crowdfunding is mostly they want great ideas to succeed. So they are there not so much also for the returns, except the very professional crowdfunding platforms, okay? Now, angels investors, business angel investors. Okay, this is people that actually either they are their profile of these people, either they had a company and they sold the company and they made some money, so they want to go back and invest some of the money. Hopefully they can make a success to the other company, to your idea, and then that will have an exit, meaning that they will sell the things and they could get some returns. I would like to tell you that angel investors are very high risky business, and usually out of their 10 investments, they lose money 8 out of 10 because the startups, they fail. 8 out of 10 they fail. The 9th one, they try in their portfolio to break even, and they hope in the 10th, 10 companies that they have in their portfolio, the 10th one to make a big exit so they can make money out of it, so they can reinvest back, okay? So, but something else that for angel investors that I want you to make it clear is that they invest just money to you. They give 3 things to a startup. Funding, money is the last one. The first thing that they give you usually is the know-how, because they enter to something that they have a know-how from their previous experience. So they bring you the know-how. The second thing they bring you is the network that they have, in order in your next phase of funding you can ask money, because they know the VC funds, they know other business angels that they like to invest and so on. And the third thing that they are giving you is the money. So when you have to pick up a business angel investor, the most important thing is first of all to see if your chemistry is right, okay, and also to see what actually they will bring into your company. Do not look only for the money, because this is not the first priority for you, okay, even though you need for the money to survive, okay. So this is the 3 main elements: know-how and mentorship that they give you, the business angels, network and funding. So if you remember this, what the business angels, what is a business angel and what they offer you, this is enough, to know for today. Now, something else that motivates business angels, just to understand, is also they like, to make a difference in the world, because they went through that process, they made some money, and they have their social responsibility, okay? It's not philanthropy, okay, don't take me wrong, but they have this passion that they want to give money back, so that money could be a success story of a new, startup or a company. So they have in mind, most of them, I'm not saying all of them, but this a community that I know very well, if you talk to them in private or also studies that they exist, the first thing is actually to do an impact investment. Is the community development, they invest, they say in the ratio of 250 kilometers around, their home base. They try to remain innovators in the field, and what is, they cannot have millions of ideas, so that's why they enter to young people, especially that they have great ideas, but they don't have the know-how of how to make it succeed. So that's why, and they need the variation because they are boring to doing the same things. Okay, so this is the profile, the persona of a business angel. Now, there is in Europe is this European Business Angel network that actually members of business angels, they are becoming members. Members are business angels because they want to learn from each other and improve their success rate. That's why it exists. Just to know, they invested the numbers. This is the real numbers from IBAN, 745 million. Were invested. There are around 35,000 visible, business angels in Europe. And you can read the other numbers just to get some ideas. Okay, they invest usually, you see the highest investment is anything that has to do with technology and in fintech, enterprise software, health. But now, it's changing also to environmental things, to health and so on. And they exist, of course, not only in Europe, but also in Russia. There are members, from all over the world. Now, I will try to finish in 5 minutes, but I don't want to confuse you too much, but just remember the terms. Usually, let's say that you are an investor and you want to invest in the company. There are two common, things that they are using in the investment community. One, they call it preferred equity, and the other one, they call it convertible note. The convertible note is used mostly in the United States, but now it's been used also sometimes in Europe. Preferred equity is a stock that carries with a certain rights superior to common equity in terms of how and when it gets paid back, the investor, okay? Convertible notes are short-term loans given by investors to startups that convert to equity when the next round of finance, you remember the phases, the cycles of investments that I explained you at the beginning. Okay, venture capitalists, there are actually, this is a professional, senders that they invest only in a way when you have sales, when they actually, the startup starts making sales. And why they do that? Because they report to shareholders. And since it's not like the business angels is their own money, their pocket money, okay? The venture capitalists is actually because they have shareholders and they report to them, they want to have less risk, than a business angel is taking. So these people, the venture capitalist firms that they exist all over the world, they want actually to invest to something that will have a better success rate. So they like to see traction, they call it, sales, okay? There are corporate ventures. Corporate ventures, let's say companies, big ones that, BMW or whatever, they have their own corporate ventures inside and they try to see, startups ideas and they try to pick up ideas around, on this area so to stay also competitive. You remember where we said, at the beginning about startups and big companies, we said the startups are more agile. And that's why the corporate ventures, they try also because they cannot be so agile to do this and give some money in order to identify some companies so they can buy them also inside. Now, this is now for tomorrow for you that, okay, that was an exercise. It was not mostly, to start up your own company, but it's the first thing, build up a strong and complete team. We've said that, you have to remember. Create a solid business plan. Be realistic about your projection. This is very important because usually they found something, the founders, and they say this is the market, and the market is, let's say 7 billion, euros, and then they say in the first year we will get 30% of that. This is mission impossible. Okay, so try to be realistic with your projections. Research your potential investor and do not just go after the money if it doesn't fit to your mentality, of the person, otherwise it will be fail for you and fail for them also. Think what type of investor fits all your needs, very important. And think how much share are you willing to give away. Tomorrow they will ask you, okay, this is you will say in your business model canvas, this is our idea, and this is how much we need. And then they will ask you, okay, how much equity are you planning to give us back? So you have to be ready to answer also this question. Okay, you must have one key takeaway at least for now. Okay, how to approach them? Let's say investors, you have to understand their brain. Okay, how they think. They are thinking on the exit business means that they don't want a company. First thing they ask the founders is, okay, this is a great idea we have. I'm convinced. I want to invest on you. And then the second question they will ask you, it will be, okay, are you planning to sell the company? If you say, no, no, this is my baby, I will never sell, then they will walk away. They will leave. Okay. So usually we say this is when you find an investor and as a founder, this is a marriage, but with a specific day of divorce because of the exit. They want to exit so they can get the money, hopefully back. So, okay, we call it investment readiness, but I don't want to spend too much time on this. Okay, how to approach them? Sometimes, usually I get the question, how we will find this investor? Let the others know that what you are doing and that you are searching for investing when you are ready for that. Okay, don't do it very early, don't do it very late. You have to be always on the right time. Look through your connections, use your network to get introduced, do your research, get out and meet people. And there are also, you can apply in online. There are many platforms that you can apply online, and if they see an interest, they will get back to ask you more questions. Suggestions from my side: get in touch with the investors through their close environment, family, friends, their colleagues, former or current entrepreneurs, service providers that they cooperate, or any other mutual connections. Okay. How the investors tick, and maybe I'll stop with this. Investors exist to make money, to maximize the return. They undergo very high risk. You have to understand this is actually from the case of business, it's their own money. They look out for the hot deal. They look for the next unicorn. All of them that's the dream. And of course, they go by recommendations. Okay. And they call it smart money. Why they call it smart money? Because they give them not just money, they give the business angels their know-how, they give the network, and of course the money. So that's why they call it smart money. And this is okay, we discussed that many times, but this is the selection criteria, and this is what you will be asked tomorrow. How innovative is your idea? How your idea could be sustainable, not only 2-3 years and then the S-curve. Who are the people, what is your team, and how you are complementary to each other. If that company can scale up, what is your go-to-do market strategy, and if you understand the financial projections that you put. So we have some financial understanding. And maybe I'll stop with this, and maybe let me go just, okay, there are several books for those of you, let me know, you can get back to me. Maybe this one. Just to know how the business angels, they work, the phases, they search for target companies, they select, some companies, they do due diligence, they go to final negotiations, they do post-investment involvement, and then they go for exit, okay? And usually I'm getting this question, there are many other things that we don't have the time today, maybe another time, or some of you that you are interested on this. I'll go to the last slide. Okay, usually they say, okay, this is an art or science, okay, the startup thing and the investment. And actually, science is the easy part because, you have the numbers, but because on startups there is not any EBITDA, there is not any numbers, for someone to find you. So it's mostly an art. So I can go more to social science. So it's how strong is the team, and this is subjective, how you will find how strong is the team, how innovative is your idea. There is not any indicators, to find this, and this is our biggest challenge, in the investors thing, how actually could improve the success rate. So thank you very much for this. If we have, a few minutes for questions, if you have any questions, otherwise. Okay.
I think we're okay. So I think we're okay. Thank you very much. All the questions basically have to be taken via email, as there are certain other commitments now. We will get back to everyone that asked questions, feel free to send them to me or to the ReTraCE group, or to wherever you wish to place them. And of course, this discussion can be also continued in the morning. So tomorrow morning, before the actual pitching sessions, we are more than willing to take further questions. So thank you very much. I believe it was a very good basic overview and insight into what is required. And again, for more questions on this, we can reconnect in the morning with tomorrow's schedule. So thank you very much.
Okay, all the best. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for being with us today. A very practical day with direct showcasings of startups, successful startups on circular economy that provided with quite a lot of, let's say, beneficial insights into how these practices are actually taken to the market. So, and especially with the last presentation, you saw clear science that was taken to the market with very, very concrete steps. And this should help any prospective entrepreneur in circular economy to better understand what are the steps required in order to launch your idea to the market. Thank you very much for being with us today. Tomorrow, what will happen, if interested to join us, we will have our teams of ESRs that will present actually their business models, their startup ideas to a panel of investors and startup mentors in order to receive feedback. And whoever's interested, you can actually attend this session. We're more than happy to have you connected, and with the same details and at the same time schedule. So thank you very much, Andrea. I think we're good for now, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Adrian, for sharing this. As I said, I've copied all the questions which were raised, and tomorrow morning we can start from these. Yeah, we'll be available during the afternoon for the usual sessions, introductory sessions with the ESRs for checking that everything is going all right. Thank you for your patience. I know that the schedule was even more intense than what we anticipated, but it was for good reasons, because we had a lot of excellent cases to listen to. And I think this will be very beneficial both for the research of our ESRs, but also for the practical work they'll be presenting tomorrow. So thank you very much for this fourth excellent day in a row, and see you all tomorrow morning.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.